Hello and welcome. My name is Olivia Bushy, and I'm a research services librarian here at Mercer University Library. In this video, we are going to talk about online archives. Our discussion will center on the different types of online archives, and we will get familiar with various terms used to refer to those archives. Before defining the types of online archives out there, here are some caveats and a suggestion. For the caveats, it's really important to acknowledge that there's not always a clear boundary with the different types of online archives. The main different types of archives all do similar things. For an example, an archive that calls itself a digital library is pretty similar to an archive that calls itself a digital collection. Additionally, these are not the only types of online archives, nor is this necessarily how other people would divide up the different types. We will go over some of the most common that seems to be helpful to students. However, what an archive calls itself usually represents something about their organization, their priorities, and how they want to be discovered. This leads to the suggestion that if you are looking for an online archive in some kind of search engine, try using a variety of these terms that we will discuss in your search. There might be multiple types of archives out there with primary source documents relevant to your particular history research. Let's talk about the scope and objectives for this video. Our scope is primarily focused on finding primary sources for history research. However, online archives can be used for a whole lot more than just history. Even if you are in other disciplines or you have other objectives, this video can still be relevant to you. Our learning objectives by the end of this video, you should understand why online archives are a valuable tool, especially for finding primary sources for historical research. Because I can't show you every single archive out there, we'll also discuss the various types of online archives and the terms used to refer to them. And finally, you should be able to distinguish the common features of these different types of archives. Why should you consider using online archives at all in your research? Well, archives by their very nature are tasked with collecting unique and important documents and items and helping to preserve them. Usually this mission also includes allowing researchers to interact and learn from these materials, and online archives are used in the same way. Online archives also help to expand access because the physical reach of any archive is limited. Some objects are unique or one of a kind, and if you are not near that archive that has that item, you cannot view it, especially if that item is in a completely different country. Online archives break down these geographical barriers, and researchers are no longer limited by where they live. Related to this, archives serve a community or receive documents from particular people or organizations. As such, each collection within an archive is only as complete as their donations and holdings. Most archives have gaps or missing documents. Online archives can help you fill in these gaps by making relevant works available. This means that you can pull primary sources from multiple archives and get a more complete picture than you otherwise would be able to from just a single archive. Finally, a lot of archival materials are old and they are delicate, and if a scholar wants to look at them or read them, they might break them or the document could become damaged through use. In this regard, online archives help with preservation because most researchers will not need to access the physical object, but they can use the digital copy available to them. Before defining the different types of online archives out there, here are some caveats and a suggestion. For the caveats, it's really important to acknowledge that there are not always clear boundaries with the different types of online archives. The main different types of archives all do similar things. For an example, an archive that calls itself a digital library is pretty similar to an archive that calls itself a digital collection. Additionally, these are not the only types of online archives, nor is this necessarily how other people would divide up the different types. We'll go over some of the most common that seem to be the most helpful to students. However, what an archive calls itself usually represents something about the organization, their priorities, and how they want to be discovered. This leads to the suggestion that if you are looking for an online archive in some sort of search engine, try using a variety of these search terms that we will discuss in your search. There might be multiple types of archives out there with primary source documents relevant to your particular history research. Now on to the types of online archives. We are actually going to go over about 6 and in no particular order. But first up, we have digital archives, digital collections, and digital library. First, digital archives. Now, if something is labeled a digital archive, it probably has a strong preservation aspect to it with a focus on primary sources. And it's also typically divided into thematic collections. Let's take a look at this page from the Washington State Archives. So here is the Washington State Archives Digital Archives. This is the official online repository of digital and electronic records preserved by the Washington State Archives. And what you can find on here are vital records, census records, land, naturalization, and military records, photography, maps, oral histories, and audio recordings, and many government records because this is a government archives. You can begin a search with a surname or a keyword, and you can browse by collection type if you're interested in a particular set of records to search within. Next item on the list is digital collection. The term digital collection has become something of a catch-all term for all kinds of thematic collections of digitized material. So these can be museum-like materials, such as manuscript, books, and images. Basically anything that constitutes a collection. This is probably the most common term that you will see used. Let's go to this example from the New York Public Library Digital Collections. Within the New York Public Library Digital Collection is the Early American Manuscript Project. This project is a digitization effort focused on early American manuscript sources, handwritten documents from colonial, revolutionary, and early national periods of United States history, and it was originally held at the New York Public Library's Manuscript and Archives Division. Now, if we scroll down, we can see that it has been subdivided depending on the collections, whose papers, whose items. We're going to click on this first item here, Elizabeth D. Hart Bleeker's diary. And it gives you information about the collection itself, the creator, physical description, citation preferences, access to the material. And if we scroll down, we can see that it has been digitized. And let's go to a page with actual handwriting on there so you can see what it looks like. And here is a page from her diary. Now let's talk about digital libraries. Digital libraries are exactly what you think they are. So these are really focused on usage and accessibility like a typical library. They are primarily focused on the printed work, which can be primary, secondary, or even tertiary resources. It really just depends on what the library has in its holdings. Let's take a look at HathiTrust. HathiTrust is a large-scale digital library or repository and collaborative partnership of academic and research institutions that focus on preserving and providing access to digitized books, journals, and other scholarly materials. For example, we can check out one of their collections. We'll come up to the collections, featured collections, so you can see an example of what a scan looks like. And there's two ways you can view a lot of the items. You can either click Catalog Record, which will give you information about the item itself, very similar to a MARC record. Many items within Hathi gives you a full view of the item itself, and it does tell you the original source of the scan. So we can click the scan from the University of Michigan so we can see this digitized item. And you can click on the next page. Sometimes you can download the item. It does give you, some items do have limitations on how much you can download, but there are different formats: PDF, text, JPEG, TIFF, just to give you an idea. This is very helpful, especially when you want to get access to a book that is no longer available in the bookstores. Let's move on to the next type of online archives. On this slide, we have institutional repository, digital humanities, and scholarly databases. An institutional repository is really just a platform for storing, maintaining, accessing, and preserving digital or digitized objects. But what makes these different is that they're usually on the smaller scale, just the institutional level. For example, a local historical group might have its own institutional repository. Also, universities usually have their own institutional repository. Let's take a look at Mercer's own repository called URSA. URSA stands for University Research Scholarship and Archives. This is Mercer's institutional repository and digital platform that collects and shares and preserves the university's scholarly and historical output. Within this collection, you will find historical documents such as the yearbook, which was called the Cauldron, old student newspapers, the Mercer Cluster, and other institutional records. By digitizing and sharing materials, Mercer's URSA helps preserve Mercer's history and scholarly output for research, education, and community engagement. Next, we'll look at digital humanities. Very few projects will actually have the term digital humanities in the title, as this is more of a research discipline that is really expanding its reach in a whole variety of subjects. So very briefly, digital humanities are research projects by humanities scholars that use data and digital tools to present and interpret primary sources. So they are not just giving you primary sources, but they are reforming the way we engage with those primary sources. Again, these are just broad strokes, and there are many ways to do digital humanities. And there are many types of projects out there. But for this video, I picked a historical project to look at as an example called Mapping the Republic of Letters. Mapping the Republic of Letters is a digital humanities project that visualizes and analyzes the correspondence network of early modern scholars, philosophers, and intellectuals, essentially members of the Republic of Letters in Europe and the Americas, from roughly the 16th to 18th centuries. The Republic of Letters was a transnational intellectual community where ideas, debates, and discoveries were circulated across borders through letters, pamphlets, and publications. On this website, there is interactive maps to understand how the network worked, a searchable database containing metadata about the letters, including the sender, recipient, date, locations, allowing researchers to filter by various criterias. And so we can go to publications so you can see how it works and looks. And it gives you an idea of what is within the projects. Here we can click on the correspondence network of Benjamin Franklin, the London decades, and it gives you an index of the project, articles, visualizations, the schema, and the data. The final archive we will talk about, and one that is could be familiar to many of you, is scholarly databases. This is on the list mainly because it's not what comes to mind when students think about online archives. This is because many scholarly databases are meant to find secondary historical sources and research papers from academics or other interpretive texts. There are databases that are only for historical primary sources, and we actually have a few of those here at Mercer. Let's take a look at this one from the American Antiquarian Society. You can access the American Antiquarian Society Historical Periodicals collection through Mercer's University Library's webpage. So when you come to the webpage itself, you just go to the databases A to Z and you click there. And since it begins with A, we can just scroll down through the A's. And here we go. As you see, it is divided up by time period, so be sure to be careful to select the correct time period that you are interested in researching. I'm just going to click on the first one. Now, this collection is a major archive of historical magazines and journals drawn largely from the American Antiquarian Society holdings. It gives students full text access to thousands of periodical titles that document American life, thought, culture, and society over more than 2 centuries. The archive contains full image page reproductions and searchable text, letting you view original layouts, illustration, ads, and articles as they appeared in print. For today, I'm going to use Georgia as an example so I can pull up a item for you to view. And I'm going to select the second one here. It gives you information, the title, when it was where it was published, and what database it was in. Subject, geographic terms, and to view the item itself, we're going to click on Access Now PDF. And here is the article itself as it appeared back in 1741. And you can click on the arrows to go through the different pages. Now you can come up here and click on this image to download the item itself so you can view it offline, or you can print it if you so desire. We'll finish up this video going over some other relevant important terms. The first term is memory institution. Memory institutions are any organization dedicated to preserving and documenting our collective past, and doing so goes well beyond traditional archives and libraries. It can include museums, historical society, hobbyists, nonprofits, and so forth. More often than not, you will need to do research on who has what primary source and then search that particular group's digital archives. Next is the online exhibit or gallery. This is a pretty general term, but these tend to skew more towards a museum experience. They're often visual curated collections on a certain theme. This makes them very good for displaying artworks and museum holdings, but they can also be important documents or collection highlights. It really just depends on the organization. And finally, I want to talk a bit about what is called finding aids. Finding aids are how every archive catalogs their holdings. So even if you find an archive and they don't have a lot of digital materials online, you will probably still be looking through an online finding aid of some kind to see what they have. This is because archives get boxes and boxes full of things, and when they process the archive or collection, they make a guide that lists all the content of that collection. These are very important for finding relevant documents that are contained within a particular archive. Also, these are often tied up with their digital collections, so many finding aids will let you know what materials have been digitized and which ones you can access. Thank you for your time and attention, and I hope that this video was helpful to you and your search for primary sources. And if you ever need assistance finding any primary sources, please come ask a librarian at the library. Again, thank you.